Hey funky folk, today I'm going to explain the difference between a field mushroom and a death cap mushroom. In a previous video I explained the way to tell the difference between a field mushroom and a yellow staining mushroom. Now these two mushrooms look very similar and it's very easy to mix those two up. The consequences if you do down a yellow staining mushroom is you will just get a bit crook in the guts. You might have diarrhea or you'll be vomiting. So it's not the end of the world. It's not pleasant, but it's not the end of the world. There's another mushroom though that it looks kind of similar to, and people do make the mistake of getting them mixed up, and it's the death cap. It's named the death cap for a reason, because if you do make the mistake and eat that one, you'll probably be reading, or people will be reading about you in the news. Okay, it happens every season. A couple of people just don't know what they're doing, eat the wrong one, and they've accidentally eaten an Amanita phalloides. So, how do we tell the difference between a field mushroom and a death cap? Sometimes the death caps, they do look very similar on the top there. Okay, sometimes the death cap can be orange, and it can start to look a little bit like those red and white dotted amanitas. Right, they're the classic Mario Kart magical mushroom that you might see growing underneath pine trees, the red and white dot ones. Okay, those are amanitas as well. Different species. This is the Amanita phalloides, it's the death cap, and often this cap here can make you start to wonder whether it might be a field mushroom. Alright, you'll see that the cap reminds you of a fieldy, and you check the base and it doesn't stain yellow, so you think you beauty, it's not a yellow stainer. Okay, the next check you need to do to make sure it's not a death cap is you need to check the spore colour. Okay, you need to check underneath to see what colour the spores are, because if these spores are white, it's an Amanita and it's a death cap and you should definitely not eat it. An edible field mushroom will always have dark chocolate brown spores. Now in a previous video I explained that sometimes these are all field mushrooms. Okay, you flip it over and these, you might think that the spores under here are actually a whitish pinkish colour based on the gills. I need to point out that the gill colour does not always give you a true representation of what colour the spores are. Okay, the spores in every one of these mushrooms are dark chocolatey brown. It's just that these are a bit younger. The gills are whitish and pinkish, but the spores in there would be dark chocolate brown. So we need to figure out a way to do a spore test, because we can't just go on gill colour. So what you do is you take these home, you'll chop off the stems, so you've just got the flat cap, and you will sit them down on a white piece of paper, is what I use. And you also need to put the same mushrooms onto a dark piece of paper. Ideally you would use black paper, but these are isolation times and I don't have any black paper, so I just used a colour that's not white. Okay. Some people put a glass over these to speed up the process. Basically, if you leave that for a day or two, what's going to happen is the spores are going to fall out of the gills and they're going to land on the paper. After a few days, remove the cap and you can see that the colour of the spores here. So here's that dark chocolatey brown colour. This mushroom here has dropped its spores onto the white paper, but you can't see it. That's why it's important to put the same variety of mushroom onto a darker piece of colour, because here you can see that it has white spores. Okay, so it's a pretty simple technique, the spore print, but it's crucial if you want to tell the difference between an edible field mushroom and a death cap mushroom. You can rule out yellow stainer by the smell and the yellow stain, and you can rule out death cap if it has white spores. Not white gills, white spores. So white spores in the death cap and dark chocolate spores in the field mushroom. Happy hunting. Oh, educational purposes only, informational purposes only, not to be taken